Running from a forced marriage, she knocked on a cowboy's door. What he said left her shaken. The man was not like most people in the small frontier town. He was known for his courage, his honesty, and a quiet determination that set him apart. Every day he walked the same paths, performed the same chores, and lived the same simple life. Yet, inside, he felt restless. Life on the edge of the wild lands was never easy. He had grown up learning that danger could appear at any moment, and that survival depended on being alert, strong, and fair. People in the town admired him for his bravery, but they also noticed that he kept to himself. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight, and people listened. The frontier was full of stories. Stories of brave men and women, of towns growing under the shadow of danger, of families struggling to carve out a life from the unforgiving land. But some stories were darker. Rumors sometimes drifted through the town like the wind itself, carrying news that was both frightening and impossible to ignore. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, he overheard some travelers talking in whispers. They spoke of a young Apache woman who had been captured by a group of raiders. She had been taken far from her home, and no one knew exactly where. Her family had searched desperately, but the land was wide, dangerous, and full of enemies. The travelers' voices trembled as they spoke. They feared for her life. As he listened, a strange feeling stirred in him. It was more than just concern. It was a deep, urgent need to act. He could not sit idly by while someone suffered so far from help. He knew that many people would call such action foolish, even reckless. The dangers were real. Raiders were ruthless. The land was unforgiving. And the journey would be long and treacherous. But he felt a sense of responsibility, almost as if fate itself had chosen him to do what others could not. The next morning, he prepared for the journey. Now, his movements were calm but deliberate. He packed essentials, food, water, and his trusted weapons. Every tool, every item was placed carefully, because he knew that in the wild, a small mistake could become a deadly one. As he tightened the straps of his pack, neighbors watched from their porches, curious and worried. They had heard the rumors too, and some even tried to warn him. "It's too dangerous," they said.
"You might not come back." But he only nodded, a quiet determination in his eyes. He knew the risks, and he had made his decision.
Fear did not stop him. He trusted his skill, his knowledge of the land, and his instincts. As he left the town, the early morning mist wrapped the world in a soft gray blanket. The forest loomed ahead, dense and mysterious, a place of beauty but also of hidden danger. Birds chirped nervously, and somewhere in the distance, the faint howl of a wolf reminded him that he was stepping into a wild, unpredictable world. Every step took him farther from safety and closer to the unknown. Yet with each step, his resolve grew stronger. The thought of the young woman, alone and frightened, gave him purpose. The journey was not easy. The land was rough and unforgiving. Streams needed to be crossed, steep hills climbed, and thick underbrush pushed aside. Sometimes he moved silently, careful not to make a sound that could alert anyone watching. Other times he had to move quickly, racing against time and danger. Nights were the hardest. The forest was alive with strange noises, the snapping of branches, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of animals. Each sound could signal a threat. He slept little, always alert, always ready. His body ached, but his spirit remained strong. Along the way, he encountered small signs that confirmed he was on the right path. Broken branches, footprints in the mud, and scraps of clothing told him that he was getting closer. He studied every detail, every clue, because he knew that a single mistake could mean failure. He also thought about the woman he was trying to save. He imagined her strength and her courage, even in the face of such terrible circumstances. The thought of her gave him hope and kept him moving forward when exhaustion threatened to slow him down. As days passed, he faced moments of fear and doubt. He remembered the warnings of those in town, the stories of men who had tried and failed. But he also remembered his own training, his knowledge of survival, and the instinctive courage that had guided him before. He reminded himself that his journey was not just for himself. It was for someone who had no other protector, someone who needed him to be brave. Every challenge he faced, he overcame with patience, skill, and determination. He became one with the land, moving with it, understanding it, and respecting its power. He also observed the world around him in a way few did. He noticed the beauty of the forest, the way sunlight filtered through the trees, the soft ripple of a stream, the quiet presence of deer grazing in the distance. These moments of peace reminded him why life was worth protecting, why courage mattered, and why helping someone in need was a duty he could not ignore. In the midst of danger, he found clarity and purpose. Finally, after many days of travel, he arrived near the location where the woman was believed to be held. The area was heavily guarded, and danger was at its highest. He could see signs of human activity, small fires, footprints, and the occasional distant voice. His heart pounded, but he did not hesitate. He remembered the reason he had come this far. This was no longer just about adventure or bravery. It was about justice, compassion, and doing what was right. As he prepared for the next step, he paused for a moment. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the trials he had faced, and the person he was about to meet. He wondered what she had endured, how she must have felt, and how fear and hope had battled within her. He felt a mix of anticipation and determination, knowing that the next moments would define everything. He steeled himself for whatever came next, ready to act with courage and respect, knowing that the task ahead was dangerous but necessary. Though the sun was high in the sky and the forest seemed calm, he knew that the true challenge was just beginning. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on his tools, and stepped forward, ready to face whatever came his way. The journey had tested his body, his mind, and his spirit, but it had also shown him the importance of courage, patience, and the will to do what was right. Every step had led him here, and now the moment of truth was near. The man moved quietly through the dense forest, his senses sharper than ever. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves, set his heart racing. He knew that the people holding the young Apache woman were alert and dangerous. He could not afford a single mistake. The journey so far had been long and tiring, but now the real test had begun. He paused, crouching behind a thick tree trunk, and studied the small clearing ahead. There in the distance he saw a few figures moving slowly. They seemed relaxed, unaware that someone was approaching. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. Patience and careful observation were more powerful than rushing in blindly. He watched for a long time, taking note of their movements, the patterns of their patrols, and any weak points in their attention. He realized that if he acted too quickly, it could put the woman in greater danger. He needed a plan, one that would be clever, quick, and precise. He took a deep breath, remembering everything he had learned from his past experiences in the wild. Stepping carefully over roots and stones, he inched closer, blending with the shadows and listening intently. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke and cooking, a sign that someone had recently made a fire. It told him that the captors were settled and not expecting visitors, but it also warned him that the woman might be nearby, in need of immediate help. The forest was alive with sounds, birds calling to each other, small animals rustling through the underbrush, and the distant murmur of water from a stream. All of it seemed ordinary, but he knew that even ordinary sounds could hide danger. He slowed his steps, moving like a shadow, careful not to snap a twig or alert anyone to his presence. As he approached the clearing, he finally saw her. She was sitting quietly, her hands bound, her face pale but strong. Despite her captivity, there was a spark of determination in her eyes, a silent courage that impressed him deeply. He felt a surge of resolve. He could not fail her. He waited for the right moment. One of the captors stepped away, leaving only a few men near the woman. He noticed their positions and movements carefully. Timing was everything. He could see the tension in the woman's posture. She was alert, wary, and clearly afraid. Yet, even in that fear, there was a quiet strength. She had endured so much, and now she had no choice but to trust that help would come. He whispered a small, reassuring thought to himself. Just a little closer, and you will be free. Suddenly, a small distraction presented itself. A bird flew noisily across the clearing, catching the attention of one of the captors. He seized the moment, moving swiftly but silently. The man's steps were measured, each one deliberate. He knew he had to get close enough to cut the bindings without being seen, and he also had to make sure he could protect the woman if the captors noticed him. His heart raced, but his mind was sharp. He reminded himself of the importance of patience and strategy. Every move was calculated, every breath controlled. Finally, he was close enough. The captors were not looking directly at the woman, giving him a brief but critical opportunity. He crept up behind a tree and observed the situation carefully. He could see the fear in the woman's eyes, but also the hope that perhaps someone was coming to save her. He called out softly, just enough for her to hear, "Stay calm. I am here to help you." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of relief crossing her face. He quickly but gently moved to her side, cutting the bindings that held her wrists. The ropes fell to the ground, and she rubbed her sore hands, still wary but trusting him enough to stay close. As soon as she was free, the situation became more dangerous. The captors began to notice something was wrong. One of them shouted, and suddenly, the clearing was alive with movement. He acted quickly, grabbing the woman and pulling her behind a large boulder. The captors searched frantically, shouting orders to each other, but he had already thought several steps ahead. He led the woman through a hidden path he had noticed earlier, a narrow trail covered with bushes that would keep them out of sight. The forest seemed to guide him, offering cover and hiding places at every turn. The journey away from the captors was tense and exhausting. The woman stumbled at times, and he supported her, encouraging her to keep going. Every sound made them freeze. The crack of a branch, the distant shout, the sudden rustle of leaves. They moved like shadows, blending with the forest, careful to avoid detection. The woman's fear was evident, but so was her courage. She followed his instructions without hesitation, trusting him completely despite having just met him. He admired her bravery and felt an even stronger determination to get her to safety. As they moved deeper into the forest, the terrain became rougher. Steep slopes, fallen trees, and dense underbrush slowed their progress. He helped her over obstacles, guided her along hidden paths, and encouraged her when she felt tired or discouraged. Despite the fear and exhaustion, there was also a growing sense of connection between them. Words were few, but understanding passed silently between them. He respected her space, her strength, and her dignity, and she, in turn, recognized the care and courage he displayed. Night fell, and the forest transformed. Shadows grew longer, and the sounds of nocturnal animals filled the air. They made camp in a small, hidden clearing, carefully choosing a spot where they could rest without being easily found. He built a small fire, careful to keep the flames low and smoke minimal. They ate quietly, sharing a meal in silence, both aware of the danger that surrounded them. As they sat together, he noticed the exhaustion in her eyes and the faint signs of relief. She had endured so much, yet she still had hope. He felt a deep respect and a sense of responsibility. He had to protect her until they reached safety. The night was long and filled with tension. Every sound made them alert, and every movement in the shadows caused a quickened heartbeat. He kept watch while she slept, listening for any sign of danger. The forest was alive, and while most of it was natural, he knew that danger could come from humans as well. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, the challenges they had overcome, and the determination that had carried them through. He also thought about the strength of the woman beside him, realizing that her courage matched his own in many ways. The next morning, they resumed their journey. The forest was quieter, but the threat of pursuit remained. They moved steadily, using the skills and knowledge he had gained over years in the wild. He taught her small techniques to stay hidden, move silently, and use the environment to their advantage. She listened carefully, absorbing every word, and her confidence grew with each step. Though the journey was dangerous, there was also a sense of shared purpose, a silent understanding that they were working together to achieve something important, her freedom. As they traveled, he spoke softly, asking her questions about her life, her experiences, and her thoughts. She answered cautiously at first, but gradually opened up. Their conversation was brief but meaningful, filled with moments of laughter and shared understanding. He learned about her family, her culture, and the hardships she had faced. She learned about his life, his values, and the reasons that had driven him to come so far to help her. This exchange created a bond, a connection that went beyond words, rooted in trust, respect, and shared experience. By the time the sun reached its peak, they had made significant progress. The captors were far behind, and the forest provided cover and protection. The woman's fear had not disappeared, but it was tempered by the knowledge that she was safe with someone who truly cared. The man felt a sense of relief, but he knew the journey was not over. There were still obstacles ahead, and he had to remain vigilant. Yet for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope, a sense that freedom was within reach. The rescue was not just about physical freedom. It was about restoring dignity, hope, and trust. The man understood that this was a delicate task, requiring not only bravery but also respect and compassion. He treated her as an equal, a partner in this journey, rather than simply as someone to be saved. This approach strengthened their bond and made the journey smoother. Together, they moved forward, each step bringing them closer to safety and a new beginning. The forest had become their world, a place both dangerous and strangely comforting. The man led the way, careful and alert, while the young Apache woman followed, learning to trust him more with every step. The early excitement of the rescue had faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of a long, challenging journey. Each step was measured, each movement deliberate. The terrain was rough, with fallen trees, sharp rocks, and hidden roots that threatened to trip them. Yet even in the face of such difficulties, there was a growing sense of unity between them, a silent understanding that they had to rely on each other to survive. The first few days back were the hardest. They moved quietly through the forest, avoiding well-worn trails and any signs of human activity. The captors might still be searching, and he knew that even a single misstep could bring danger crashing down on them. He taught her small ways to stay hidden, how to move without making noise, how to blend with the shadows, and how to read the land to anticipate threats. She listened carefully, absorbing every word, her eyes bright with the determination. She was learning quickly, showing a strength that impressed him deeply. He realized that her courage was not just in surviving captivity, but in taking control of her own path now. Even as they moved, the man observed her closely. He noticed small things, the way she flinched at sudden sounds, the way her hands trembled when crossing rough ground, the moments when she looked at him with questions. She did not speak aloud. He did not force her to speak, but he offered comfort through small gestures, a steadying hand on her arm, a gentle word of encouragement, or simply walking alongside her to show she was not alone. Over time, she began to relax, showing a quiet trust that warmed him more than he could explain. He understood that trust was fragile, especially for someone who had been taken against her will, and he treated it with care. Their journey was not just physical, it was emotional as well. The forest, for all its beauty, reminded her of her lost home, of family, and of the life she had been forced to leave behind. Sometimes she would pause and look at the trees, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, and tears would gather in her eyes. He did not speak at first, simply allowing her the space to feel. Then, when the moment was right, he spoke gently of hope, of a safe future, and of the life they could reach together if they stayed strong. His words were calm and reassuring, carrying a sense of certainty that was almost tangible. She began to believe that freedom was not just a dream but a possibility. As they moved farther from the clearing where she had been held, new challenges emerged. Streams needed to be crossed, cliffs navigated, and dense thickets pushed aside. The man was always at the front, scouting the safest path, helping her over obstacles, and offering guidance when the terrain became dangerous. She leaned on him physically and emotionally, relying on his strength while also learning to trust her own instincts. Together, they became a team, each step strengthening their bond and their determination to reach safety. At one point, they encountered a wide, fast-moving river. The water roared as it rushed past, and the man knew that crossing it would be dangerous. The woman hesitated, fear written clearly on her face. He knelt beside her, speaking softly. "We can do this. Step carefully, hold my hand, and trust me." He guided her across, one step at a time, using rocks and fallen logs as stepping stones. The river was cold and unforgiving, but neither of them faltered. When they reached the other side, she looked at him with a mix of gratitude and relief, and he felt a quiet pride in her courage. The nights were equally challenging. They made small camps in hidden clearings, careful to stay out of sight. He built small fires, keeping the flames low to avoid detection, and cooked simple meals. The woman watched him work with admiration, recognizing his skill and the careful thought he put into every detail. At night, they spoke quietly about many things: the forest, their pasts, and the uncertain future that awaited them. These conversations were tentative at first, but they gradually grew more open. She shared stories of her family, her village, and her life before captivity, while he spoke of his own experiences, of the lessons he had learned living in the wild, and of the values he held most dear. Despite the danger, moments of laughter began to appear. Small things, a clever way to cross a tricky path, a joke about a bird startling them, or a shared victory after a long day of travel, brought brief but welcome relief. These moments were precious, reminders that even in the darkest circumstances, hope and human connection could still exist. The woman's spirit, which had seemed fragile, began to shine more brightly. She was no longer just a captive. She was a survivor, learning to trust, to act, and to hope again. However, the journey was far from easy. They encountered signs of danger: broken branches in the wrong places, footprints that were not theirs, and occasional distant voices carried by the wind. Each time, the man instructed her to stay quiet and move swiftly. He taught her how to use the forest to their advantage, how to hide behind trees, how to recognize when it was safe to move, and how to remain alert without letting fear take control. She learned quickly, and the man marveled at her resilience and sharp mind. Together they navigated every obstacle with determination and skill. Over time, their bond grew deeper. Words were not always necessary. Small gestures, shared glances, and mutual respect created a connection that felt unbreakable. She came to rely on him not just for protection, but for guidance, reassurance, and companionship. He, in turn, felt a responsibility that went beyond duty. He cared for her deeply, not just as someone to protect, but as a person whose courage and spirit inspired him every day. They were no longer simply rescuer and rescued. They had become partners in survival, connected by shared experiences and a growing trust that neither had expected. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor, they reached a small, quiet hill overlooking a valley. From this vantage point, they could see the town in the distance. It looked peaceful, safe, and welcoming. The woman's eyes widened with emotion. She had endured so much, and now, for the first time in weeks, she could imagine a life beyond fear. She turned to him, her gratitude evident in every gesture, and he offered a reassuring smile. "We are almost there," he said softly. "Just a little further, and you will be safe." The final stretch was tense, but filled with hope. They moved cautiously, knowing that even though they were close to safety, dangers could still appear. The forest seemed quieter now, almost as if it was supporting their journey. Birds called softly. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the path ahead seemed clear. The woman walked with renewed strength, no longer as timid or uncertain as when she had first been rescued. She had endured the wilderness, faced danger, and survived with courage and intelligence. The man felt proud of her, not just for surviving, but for growing stronger with each challenge they faced together. As night fell, they camped one last time before reaching the settlement. The fire was small, the shadows long, and the forest silent. They shared a quiet meal, reflecting on the journey so far. The woman spoke softly, recounting moments that had scared her, but also moments that had given her hope. He listened intently, offering words of comfort and encouragement. They knew that the final steps would bring new challenges, questions from the townspeople, skepticism, and perhaps even judgment. But they also knew that freedom was within reach. When the first light of dawn appeared, they began the last leg of their journey. The man walked confidently, guiding her toward the settlement, while she followed, her steps steady and determined. Every obstacle they faced along the way had prepared them for this moment. The forest, which had been both a place of danger and refuge, was now behind them, and a new chapter awaited. Together they approached the town, hearts filled with hope, courage, and the unspoken understanding that their bond had grown stronger than fear, distance, or danger. The town appeared on the horizon like a small cluster of hope, bathed in the soft light of morning. After days in the wilderness, the man and the young Apache woman moved cautiously but steadily, their eyes fixed on the familiar shapes of buildings and the promise of safety. He could feel the tension in the woman beside him. She had endured so much, and while she had gained courage and strength on the journey, she had never truly felt the security that came from being among people she could trust. He reached out and gently touched her arm, offering reassurance without words. She gave a faint smile, and for a moment, the hardships of the journey seemed to fade. As they entered the outskirts of the town, the first people to notice them were farmers and laborers beginning their day. They paused, staring with wide eyes. Few had ever seen the man move through the forest in this way, and the woman's presence, unfamiliar and striking, only increased their curiosity. Whispers spread quickly. "Is that her?" one person asked. "How did he get her?" The questions and the shock reflected in their faces were mirrored by the excitement that had been building in the town for days, though few could have imagined the true story. Children ran ahead, shouting and pointing, and the news began to travel faster than the two could move. Within moments, a small crowd had gathered, curiosity and concern written clearly on every face. Men and women alike watched in disbelief. Some were admiring, nodding at the man's bravery. Others whispered doubts, questioning whether such an act had been wise or even proper. In the center of the growing crowd, the man and the young woman stopped. He knew that this was the moment to act decisively, to show respect for her and for the people who had been waiting for answers. The townspeople stared, expecting a simple explanation. They did not know the dangers the man had faced, the courage the woman had shown, or the trust that had grown between them during the long journey through the wild forest. He took a deep breath and spoke clearly, his voice carrying over the crowd. "She is safe now," he said. "I have brought her back and she will remain under protection." The words were simple but powerful, and they caused a ripple of astonishment through the town. Many people began to whisper among themselves, wondering what he meant and why he had taken such bold action. The woman standing beside him looked around with wide eyes. She had never seen so many people at once, and the mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and admiration was overwhelming. She felt a little fear return, but it was tempered by the confidence she had gained on the journey. She realized that the man had brought her here not only to save her, but to give her a chance to live freely among others who could help her rebuild her life. She looked at him with gratitude, knowing that he had risked everything to protect her. His calm presence was a source of strength, and she felt safer simply standing near him. Then came the moment that stunned everyone. The man, in a voice both steady and firm, declared, "She is my wife. She is my lawful wife, and I will care for her as I promised." The crowd gasped. Some people covered their mouths in shock. Others frowned, unsure whether to be impressed, confused, or even offended. Marriages were a serious matter in the town, and the sudden announcement left everyone speechless. Many had never expected such a bold declaration, especially under such extraordinary circumstances. The man's calm confidence, however, left no room for argument. He had acted decisively, with courage and respect, and his words carried a truth that could not be denied. The woman's eyes widened, and for a moment she did not speak. She felt a rush of emotions, surprise, disbelief, and something deeper, a growing sense of trust and even admiration. She understood that this was more than a formality. It was a promise of protection, respect, and commitment from a man who had risked everything to save her. The townspeople noticed the silent exchange between the two, and slowly their astonishment began to shift into understanding. They realized that this was not a rash decision made lightly, but an act rooted in honor, courage, and mutual respect. Some of the townsfolk approached cautiously, asking questions. "Are you certain?" one man asked. "Do you truly mean this?" The man nodded firmly. "Yes," he replied. "I have known her for only a short time, but I have witnessed her courage, her strength, and her spirit. I will not abandon her, and she will have the protection and respect she deserves." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Slowly, the crowd began to accept what they had first doubted. People began to see the truth, that this was a brave act, an honorable promise, and a step that demonstrated the man's character and integrity. Despite the growing acceptance, not everyone was immediately comfortable. Some women whispered among themselves, concerned about how quickly events had unfolded. Some men frowned, questioning the wisdom of such a bold action. But as they watched the woman standing beside the man, they could see the trust, respect, and growing bond between them. Her posture, once tense and uncertain, now carried a quiet confidence. She had endured hardship, danger, and fear, and she had survived with dignity. The man's presence gave her strength, and the townspeople began to understand that this was more than a story of rescue. It was a story of courage, trust, and the human capacity to care for another. Over the next few days, the town slowly adjusted to the news. Some people came forward to offer assistance, food, clothing, and advice for rebuilding her life. Others asked to hear the story in more detail, eager to understand the journey that had brought them here. The man recounted the rescue carefully, emphasizing the woman's courage and the dangers they had faced together. The townsfolk listened with rapt attention, marveling at the combination of bravery, strategy, and compassion that had allowed the rescue to succeed. Each new detail increased their admiration and respect. The woman began to feel more comfortable in her new surroundings. She was cautious at first, aware of the whispers and curious stares, but she also noticed acts of kindness and genuine concern. People offered to help her settle in, providing food, shelter, and guidance. She began to learn the ways of the town, listening to advice, observing daily routines, and slowly finding her place among those who had once seemed strangers. The man stayed by her side, not just as a protector, but as a guide and companion, ensuring that she felt safe and respected in this unfamiliar world. Their relationship, now recognized openly by the town, grew stronger through small, meaningful moments. He taught her about life in the settlement, how to trade, how to gather food, and how to navigate daily routines. She shared her own knowledge, traditions, and experiences, creating a mutual exchange that enriched both of them. People watched with growing respect as they worked together, learning from each other, supporting one another, and showing that courage and love could overcome fear and prejudice. In time, the initial shock faded, replaced by admiration and acceptance. The townspeople began to see the couple not just as a rescuer and the rescued, but as partners who had faced danger together and emerged stronger. Their story became an example of bravery, trust, and honor. It reminded everyone that true courage was not only in facing physical danger, but in acting with integrity, compassion, and respect for others. The man's bold declaration, once shocking, was now seen as an act of moral strength and human decency, inspiring those around him to reconsider their own understanding of courage and commitment. The young woman, once captive and uncertain, now felt a sense of belonging and security. She had faced unimaginable challenges, survived with dignity, and found a person who respected and cared for her deeply. The town, initially skeptical, had come to recognize the truth in her courage and the man's honor. Slowly but surely, life began to return to normal. They worked together, learned from each other, and built a life that honored both her freedom and their shared journey. As days turned into weeks, their story spread beyond the town. Travelers, traders, and nearby settlements heard of the daring rescue, the bravery of the man, and the courage of the young woman. People admired the commitment, respect, and humanity that had guided their actions. Their story became a symbol of hope, showing that even in a world full of danger and uncertainty, trust, compassion, and courage could change lives. The town, once shocked, now celebrated them, not just for the rescue, but for the example they set for everyone. Life in the town slowly settled into a new rhythm for both the man and the young Apache woman. The initial shock of their arrival and his bold declaration had faded, replaced by curiosity, acceptance, and a growing sense of admiration from the townspeople. People watched them closely, noticing the respect, care, and understanding that guided every action. The man continued to support and protect her, but not as a master to a servant. He treated her as an equal, a partner, and a trusted companion. Every decision they made together, every step they took through daily life, reflected mutual respect, courage, and the deep bond that had grown during their journey through the wild. The woman, once fearful and uncertain, began to embrace her new life. She learned the ways of the settlement quickly, observing the routines of the people, helping with chores, and sharing her own skills and knowledge. She discovered small joys she had never imagined: the warmth of a hearth in winter, the laughter of children playing in the streets, and the comfort of knowing she was safe. Slowly, her fear and caution gave way to confidence. She realized that she was no longer defined by her past hardships, but by her strength, courage, and the choices she made in the present. Together, the couple became a quiet force in the community. They helped others when needed, showing bravery, wisdom, and compassion. The townspeople came to trust them, seeking advice and guidance in times of difficulty. Their story became an example of courage, resilience, and the power of mutual respect. People no longer saw the man as simply a hero of a single act, or the woman as a rescued captive. They saw two individuals who had faced extraordinary circumstances, survived, and now contributed to the well-being of everyone around them. Their partnership became a symbol of hope and unity. Despite the acceptance they had gained, challenges continued. Some townsfolk were slow to trust the woman, curious about her past and her culture. Others questioned the man's decision, wondering if it had been wise to declare her his wife so publicly. He did not respond with anger or impatience. Instead, he continued to act with integrity, patience, and respect, showing through his actions that his words were sincere. Over time, the townspeople's doubts melted away. They saw that the woman was capable, independent, and kind, and they witnessed the man's continued commitment to protecting and respecting her. Actions, as always, spoke louder than words. The couple also faced personal challenges. Life after the wilderness was not always easy. Adjusting to the routines of the town, learning new skills, and navigating social expectations required effort from both of them. Yet, they approached each obstacle together, supporting one another and finding solutions with patience and understanding. In moments of difficulty, they relied on the trust and courage that had carried them through the forest. They discovered that partnership was not just about facing danger. It was about sharing responsibility, respecting differences, and growing stronger together through every experience. As weeks turned into months, the bond between them deepened. Small gestures, a shared meal, a quiet conversation, a gentle touch, strengthened their connection. They laughed together, learned together, and faced challenges side by side. The man admired her intelligence, her strength, and her ability to persevere through hardships he could never have imagined. The woman admired his courage, his unwavering sense of justice, and his deep respect for her as a person. Their relationship was built not only on gratitude or circumstance, but on shared values, mutual respect, and the understanding that they were stronger together than apart. Their story also began to inspire others. Young men and women in the town looked at them as a model of courage, integrity, and partnership. Parents told their children about the bravery of the man and the strength of the woman, emphasizing lessons of respect, compassion, and perseverance. Travelers who passed through the town carried the story to neighboring settlements, spreading the message that courage and honor could overcome fear, danger, and even prejudice. Their actions had a ripple effect, reminding everyone that one person's bravery could change many lives, and that trust, compassion, and respect were as important as any physical act of courage. The woman also began to share her own story more openly. She spoke of her family, her traditions, and the hardship she had endured. She did not dwell on suffering. Instead, she focused on resilience, hope, and the lessons she had learned. The townspeople listened with interest and admiration, recognizing the strength it took to survive and the courage it required to trust again. Her voice, once quiet and fearful, became confident and respected. Through her example, people in the town began to understand that bravery was not only about facing immediate danger, but also about surviving emotional challenges and finding the courage to live fully once freedom was regained. Over time, the couple found ways to contribute meaningfully to the town. They assisted with difficult tasks, helped settle disputes fairly, and offered guidance to those facing challenges. The man taught practical skills he had learned in the wilderness, tracking, survival, and careful observation, while the woman shared her cultural knowledge, her understanding of nature, and her unique perspective on problem solving. Together, they enriched the community, showing that collaboration, trust, and respect could overcome differences and create a stronger, more connected society. The town, once surprised and skeptical, now embraced them fully. People admired their courage, their integrity, and the way they faced life together. Even those who had initially questioned the marriage began to recognize the depth of their bond. It was no longer a matter of shock or gossip. It was a story of two people who had met under extraordinary circumstances, faced danger, and created a life of dignity, trust, and mutual support. Their story became part of the town's identity, remembered and retold, as an example of courage and human kindness. As years passed, the couple continued to grow together. They faced challenges, celebrated victories, and supported one another through every twist of life. The woman, once captive and uncertain, became a respected member of the town, admired for her courage, wisdom, and strength. The man, already known for his bravery, became an even greater symbol of integrity, compassion, and honor. Together, they showed that true courage was not just in facing physical danger, but in acting with respect, trust, and love for others. Their story left a lasting legacy. Children grew up hearing about their bravery and resilience, learning lessons about trust, compassion, and the importance of standing up for what was right. Adults reflected on the example they set, understanding that courage was not just about heroic acts, but about the daily choices to act with integrity and care. The man and the woman had not only survived incredible challenges, they had transformed the lives of those around them through their actions and their partnership. Even in quiet moments when they walked together through the town, shared a meal, or tended to small tasks, the bond they had formed remained unshakable. They had learned to trust one another deeply, to rely on each other, and to honor the courage and dignity that each brought to the relationship. Their story was no longer just about a daring rescue. It was about the enduring power of respect, trust, and shared humanity. In the hearts of the townspeople, the man and the young Apache woman became more than heroes. They became a symbol of hope. Their story reminded everyone that even in the face of fear, danger, and uncertainty, compassion, courage, and integrity could guide actions, strengthen bonds, and create a lasting impact. The journey that had begun with a daring rescue had grown into a story of partnership, resilience, and the triumph of the human spirit. The man often reflected quietly on their journey. He remembered the long days in the forest, the dangers faced, and the moments of doubt and fear. But more than that, he remembered the courage of the woman who had trusted him, learned from him, and grown stronger alongside him. He realized that the greatest act of bravery was not only in facing danger, but in opening one's heart to trust, respect, and love. The woman, too, reflected on their journey. She thought about the hardship she had endured, the kindness she had received, and the courage she had found within herself. Together they understood that their survival and success had been the result of partnership, mutual respect, and unwavering determination. Years later, when travelers came to the town, they would hear the story of the man and the young Apache woman. They would hear about the courage that had led to her rescue, the challenges they had faced together, and the bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. The story inspired others, reminding them that true bravery included not just bold actions, but respect, trust, and the willingness to stand by those in need. The legacy of their actions lived on, not only in the town but in the hearts of all who heard their story. In the end, the man and the woman had found something far greater than survival. They had found partnership, respect, and love forged in the fires of adversity. They had created a life together that honored courage, integrity, and the human spirit. Their story became timeless, a testament to the power of trust, compassion, and resilience. It was a reminder that even in the harshest of circumstances, hope could flourish, hearts could heal, and extraordinary bonds could form between two people who chose to face life together.